You are listening to the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast, where you discover management insights and strategies for a successful dental practice. There are also interviews with key people in the industry who have advice and services to help you and your team achieve great success. Hi there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast. For this episode, I know I've had many guests on over previous episodes, but this one is just me. I hope it's going to be an entertaining one for you. I trust it's going to be valuable because I'm talking about a concept that I've adopted as part of my life and part of my professional career, but it's also one that I encourage all dental teams and dental team members to embrace as well, and that is CANI, C-A-N-I. Constant and never-ending improvement. Now, CANI is something that I learned from Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker, the self-awareness guru over in America. And he brings that CANI concept from the Japanese Kaizen. Kai meaning change and Zen meaning good, so change for the good. And it's this concept to take into your world that helps you become very aware, consciously aware of the fact that in our lives we are consistently improving. The evidence is so clear when we're young. We go from crawling to walking. We go from walking to running. We go from mumbling gibberish to speaking very clearly, sometimes speaking multiple languages. We go through kindergarten, primary school, high school, university. The path for improvement is obvious during those times. Think of when you're in a sporting team and you start off not knowing how to do anything, and then one skill at a time, you learn it, master it, and become really great at it. And all of a sudden you can play that sport competitively. An instrument that you're playing as well. There are so many elements of our lives when we're growing up that make our improvement journey quite obvious to us, and we do it all at an age where we don't question it. We don't mind not knowing how to do something. We don't know how to do it, so we learn how to do it and jump onto the next thing to learn how to do. And life is beautiful when it's like that. But for some reason, when we get into our adult years, we start to want to feel more comfortable than outside of that comfort zone. We want to be very good at what we do and have strong feelings of competency in what we do. We also start to develop an awareness of what other people think of us, and we don't want other people to think of us as lacking in any way. We want them to look at us and think, wow, they're awesome at what they do. And so when we love that space incredibly, we don't tend to push ourselves out from the comfort zone into the learning zone, which is just outside that comfort zone. We don't tend to push ourselves out there because what if others no longer see us as being really good at what we do? And so when I started to really implement this CANI principle, constant and never-ending improvement principle into my world, I tell you, a few things became very obvious to me. One, 4 things I needed to get really comfortable with, actually embrace in order to improve. But also the other benefit to my life was I could clearly start seeing progress in my world. And Tony Robbins has said in the past that people become happy when they're feeling like they're progressing. So I wanted to let you know what I take dental teams through, and when I'm working one-on-one, coaching one-on-one with somebody, what I take them through in order to really fully embrace this concept of CANI. And as I'm talking to you about it, don't just think about what sort of impact it would have on you personally in your life, but also what impact would it have if your dental team was made up of a group of people that lived by this same concept, that as a team you were so passionate, so driven, felt so successful when you're constantly improving what your dental practice would be capable of. It is ridiculously awesome. So let me go through the 4 steps that are required in order for you to consistently make improvements in your world. And we all probably think to ourselves, improvement's easy. Of course, I'm happy to improve, but let's go through these 4 things and let's just tap into how comfortable you really are in creating the environment for your growth. Now, the first concept of constant and never-ending improvement needs to be embracing of feedback, your management of receiving feedback, and not even receiving feedback, but seeking feedback out. So it just seems to be such a scary thing for some people, and for me as well included. At the start of my journey, I've become quite comfortable with feedback. Now, with feedback, the reason why feedback is important is in order to improve, then we need to understand that improvement needs to be made. If improvement needs to be made, it means there is an area that can be improved upon. Now, unless we're stupid and we love going through life without improving on what we know we need to improve upon, we often don't see what it is that we need to improve upon. There is a tremendous process called the JAhari window. It's made up by 2 psychologists. One of them, a portion of their name was Joe, and the other portion of their name was Harry. So they made it JAhari window. And in the JAhari window, it has 4 elements to it. And what these 4 elements are is the open window, which is all the stuff we know about ourselves and others know about us as well. For example, if you're the life of the party, you probably know that about yourself, and others are likely to know that about you as well. Then there is the hidden stuff, and that's the stuff we know about ourselves, but we don't share it with others. Maybe it's our fear of failure. Maybe it is something that makes us feel particularly uncomfortable, and so we're going to know that about ourselves, but others will not necessarily know that about us. And then there is the unknown. That's the stuff that we don't know about ourselves and others don't know about us either. And so that's the unknown stuff. Now, what the feedback area is going to tap into is the 4th window within the JAhari window, the 4th element, which is the blind spot. And the blind spot are the things about you or about us that we don't know, we're not consciously aware of, but others do know about us. And a classic example of this in my life, if you have listened to my previous podcast episode with Meg Kennedy, I used to work with Meg for many years, was my micromanagement. I didn't know it about myself. Meg absolutely knew it about me. And that was one of the biggest areas of improvement that I embraced. And now that I'm reflecting on it, I think that's where I became very comfortable with feedback, because without being open to that feedback from Meg, if I had managed that receiving of feedback badly, I think I would have kind of put a real halt on my growth and development, certainly as a manager of people. And after going through the process, and the beautiful Meg helped me with this, she was so generous and kind to me with this process of getting rid of this terrible feature within myself of being a micromanager. On the flip side of it, the other side of that journey, I had grown so much and became so much more in control of the actions that I took. The benefits were so enormous. I think it made feedback, it flipped it for me. The meaning I attached to feedback flipped from something that was challenging to me or telling me that I wasn't good enough to an opportunity for growth and an opportunity to get better and better. And that's what the CANI principle is all about. How can I just get better and better and better? It's that real strong awareness that where I'm sitting right now today, if I reflect back to where I was 10 years ago, I've developed, I've changed, I've gotten better. And you think to yourself, thank God, can you imagine going through life and not getting better? So for 10 years from now, when I'm 60 years old, I hope that I'm a world better than I am right now. It's not saying you're bad where you are right now. It's just that you want to progress in life. You want to get better. You want to start mastering the things that you're good at, and you want to start getting good at things that you're not good at. You want to start adapting to new situations, developing new skills, growing. You just want to grow. And so the blind spot in the JAhari window, the stuff that we don't know about ourselves, but others do know about us, that's where the feedback is. And it's about creating an environment where you get to see what that feedback is. You get to see the blind spot. You make the blind spot more open. The other thing that helped me enormously in terms of receiving feedback, some of you may know that I did Toastmasters for 10 years. Toastmasters is it's not a professional speaking group, it's a public speaking organisation. So it gets normal people comfortable with speaking in front of a group of any type. Sometimes people join because they're going to have to give a eulogy at a loved one's funeral, or they're going to be giving a speech at a wedding. Maybe they have to start giving presentations for work. I started doing Toastmasters because when my first marriage was ending, I thought to myself, this could really give me my self-confidence a kick in the guts. And so I better do something to make sure that I'm remaining resilient in that space and retaining that feeling of empowerment in my life. So I started Toastmasters. A patient had actually suggested it to me as a group and an organisation that she got a lot from. So I went along to one of these meetings, stayed for 10 years because I loved it. And when we're talking about CANI, constant and never-ending improvement, Toastmasters is one space where you can really see your skills in public speaking improve enormously because you're tracking it all the time, all the way through. And within Toastmasters, one of the things, just to further explain actually, a typical Toastmasters meeting is made up of maybe an impromptu speak for 2 or 3 minutes on this particular topic, just right now, bang, just do it. You get comfortable with that. You do a round robin where you just stand up and say a few words for 10 or 20 seconds about a particular rolling story. But the big part of Toastmasters is where you prepare your 5 to 7 minute speeches. You then deliver them to other members, and you have got one of those members identified as your evaluator, and they will stand up after you've delivered your speech. They will stand up and say what you did great, what could be improved upon in their eyes, and wrap that up with, a bit of more encouragement. And with that, what I noticed was, when I first started delivering speeches, and this is common amongst many members of Toastmasters, when it comes time for the feedback, the evaluation to be delivered, you feel a great deal of trepidation about that, and you think, "Oh my gosh, like this is the difficult bit. I'm going to put on my kind of Oscar's losing face in the audience on." So I'm just going to slightly smile and nod my head in agreement when they're telling me what I did wrong. But for one, it's framed beautifully. They don't sit there and reel off 10 things you did wrong. They get you to focus on 1 at the maximum 2 things in the evaluation. But they also tell you what you did great. And this is how we should be giving feedback in dental teams as well about anything. Remind people what they are absolutely awesome at. Give them 1, a maximum 2 things to work on. Any more is going to be overwhelming. You want to just work on 1 or 2 things to improve upon for your next delivery of speech, for your next performance in that dental team. And so the first few times you do receive that feedback, you think, "Oh my gosh, this is a little bit uncomfortable." But then as you find yourself using that feedback to get better at your next and subsequent speeches, you start to recognize the enormous value it has. And without it, you wouldn't be growing. You would be stagnant within your development as a public speaker and in your comfort level of being a public speaker. And what we do find is that if you're an established member for many months, for example, or years, and then a newer member comes in and they're given the role to evaluate your speech. And again, a common thing that can happen, the newer member is lower in confidence. They see you as being an accomplished speaker in comparison to themselves still feeling those nervous, anxious moments while they're delivering their speeches. And so a common thing they may say is, "I have nothing to offer," because they think to themselves, "Well, I can't do it that well, so how could I deliver any kind of feedback for this person?" And so they don't deliver feedback. I couldn't fault it. I think it's awesome. And you see experienced Toastmasters receive that kind of evaluation, an evaluation that as a new member you'd be like, "Yes, they saw nothing wrong with what I did. I can walk out of here with my head held high." But more experienced speakers within Toastmasters feel let down, and they think to themselves, "Oh, dang, now I don't have anything to work on for my next speech." That's a disappointment. And so within Toastmasters, again, that feedback process, that the meaning you attach to feedback completely flips. It goes from something that you resist to something that you want, you welcome, you embrace, you know it's part of your learning journey and you can't get better without it. So please give me feedback. And so if you are intrigued about tapping into feedback, and because within Toastmasters as well, you also get taught how to provide an effective evaluation. So you get taught how to not just receive feedback well and use feedback effectively, but also how to deliver feedback. And so Toastmasters is an awesome organisation that I encourage everyone to join. And the other thing I do encourage everyone to do is have a look at the JAhari window. If you're intrigued to find a bit more out about it, go to my website, go to articles. I did write an article for Australasian Dental Practice magazine on this particular thing. I'll leave a link in the show notes so it's easy to find. And that just gives you some more information around the JAhari window, how it was developed, and how you can use it to really improve on the way you present yourself, the way you manage people, the kind of team member you are, the kind of leader you are. It's a very interesting process and it's vulnerable, but that's okay. On the other side of vulnerability is all that growth as well. So that's the very first step that you need to embrace in order to develop CANI, constant and never-ending improvement. We need to identify the things that need to be improved upon, and quite often we don't know what they are, so feedback is the only pathway there. Number 2 is we must embrace mistakes. Mistakes are part of learning. In fact, there is no skill that any of us have learned without making mistakes. Really bring that into your consciousness and then rejig your core belief of what it means to make mistakes in your world. Often we develop a belief within ourselves that mistakes are bad. Mistakes means you can't do it, you're not good enough, you're incompetent, you can't learn. How glorious. We need to shake up what we think about with mistakes, because we then impose those beliefs on the people around us too. And if a team member makes a mistake, we're waving the finger, tut, 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 do it better next time, I'll tell you once more, but after that you're on your own. All these things and thoughts and meanings we have around mistakes really do limit our growth. So if we want to consistently improve in our life, if we want to develop CANI, then we must also embrace the fact that in order to improve, I must make mistakes. That is where I start to modify the way I do things to get better and better and better. And so really challenge, if you're struggling with making mistakes, really challenge that core belief inside of yourself and repeat to yourself during an Empower walk. And if you're wondering what I mean by my Empower walk there, go back to the episode within this podcast called Confidence or Self-Confidence. I think it's either Confidence or Self-Confidence. And again, I'll put a link in the show notes to that actual episode, because there's a process that I go through when I've got an internal belief that is not helpful for me. I have learned how for myself to flip it to something more powerful that empowers me moving forward in my life. And have a listen to that episode. If you're having problems and issues with the way you feel about mistakes, you need to shift that belief from mistakes are bad to I love making mistakes because it makes me better. It is my only path to getting better. So I love making mistakes. I celebrate making mistakes. The third element that we need to embrace in order to develop CANI, constant and never-ending improvement, is something that we also resist with our dental team members when they're trying to learn something new. And that is to embrace the concept that in order to improve and get better and in fact master particular skills, we must give ourselves time for practice and repetition. Practice and repetition are crucial. It's with the practice and repetition, the mistakes that we make along the way, that's what allows us to modify little bit by little bit by little bit how we do the thing to become masters at doing the thing. No one tries something once and is extraordinary at it. Even people who are highly skilled, highly talented, seemingly from birth, when it comes to playing golf like Tiger Woods, or playing an instrument, or writing beautiful music, or playing a particular sport, Many times we say about these people who are superstars in their field, they were a God-given talent. They were born with that skill. How often do they practice? How often do you think Tiger Woods practices? Over and over and over again. Goodness me, even people who seemingly have a God-given talent have embraced the concept that they need to provide themselves the opportunity for practice and repetition in order to get really good at something. If you are teaching a team member at work how to do a new thing, I've often heard, I teach them once, if they do it wrong, I explain it again, and then after that, they're dead to me. In essence, terrible, terrible thing, isn't it? Whereas many times we have to practice things over and over again, dozens of times, in order to get really good at it. You think about how you held a handpiece as a dentist for the first time, as a dental nurse, how you held the suction. You felt like you were functioning with all thumbs. You had no idea how to do these things. However, now, lickety-split, it's all so easy. But it's been because you have become muscle trained in how to do things. And you need to muscle train your brain, your reflex, the way you do things, your responses to the scenario in order to get really good at it. So practice and repetition are absolutely crucial and wonderful concept to embrace in order for you to consistently improve. That's what consistent improvement is. Constant and never-ending improvement is this constant practice towards mastery. The fourth element that needs to be embraced in order for you to be on a constant and never-ending improvement journey in your life, in your work, in your dental teams, is entering into the learning zone. Now, the learning zone, as I mentioned before, we've got the comfort zone where it's all snuggly and nice and we're not challenged in any way and we're competent in everything we do. And then we've got the other extreme, which is the fear zone, the panic zone, the yikes zone. That's when you're pushed way beyond what your skills are developed to be able to contend with, and you are freaking out. An aspect of life that we can experience that in dental teams is if you were a dental nurse for years at a practice, you quit there, got a new job because you wanted to become a receptionist. So you get plonked in the reception job, and in the first couple of days, you're taught every system, every script, every single thing about that job in the first 2 days. Do you think you'd be overwhelmed? I think you'd be overwhelmed and you'd be freaking out. And what happens when we feel that overwhelm? Our brains stop thinking. We stop learning. We freeze in the moment and we just don't know what to do with all the information. We haven't had time to compartmentalize. We haven't had time to get good at things before we start learning new things. And it is real just freak out stuff. So with the learning zone, I want you to picture a grid of 4. It's just like the mouth mapping, the teeth mapping. We've got quadrant 1 on the upper left, quadrant 2 on the upper right, quadrant 3 on the lower right, quadrant 4 on the lower left. So we've got these 4 areas. In your mind's eye, go to quadrant 1. Now, quadrant 1 is unconscious incompetence. What is unconscious incompetence? Think back to when you were a wee little child and in your future, you're going to have to learn how to drive a car. But when you're a wee little child, you don't even think about it. You don't think about, one day, I'm going to have to learn how to drive a car. I'm going to have to learn how to put my foot on the brake and the accelerator, how to indicate, how to maneuver around traffic, how to avoid car accidents. I'm going to have to learn all about that. So when we're little, we're not even aware of it. So we're unconscious in our incompetence of how to drive a car. We are unaware of what we are unaware about. This is like ignorance is bliss. We don't even know what we're bad at. So this is a happy little space for us. This is comfort zone stuff. We're unaware. Now go to quadrant 2. And quadrant 2 is conscious incompetence rather than unconscious incompetence. This is conscious incompetence. This is where we are aware of what we are incompetent in. And so this is when you're 17 years old. You've sat in the car in the driver's seat for the first time And all of a sudden, you have to start to learn how to use the brake, how to use the accelerator. You try the pedals and you slam the brakes on too hard and your head hits the steering wheel. You take off like a bullet because you don't know what amount of pressure to put on the accelerator. You can't manage to be able to indicate and turn the wheel at the same time in a fluid motion. It's all very foreign to you, and you feel absolutely incompetent at all the little things that you need to do in order to learn how to drive a car effectively. So you've moved into becoming very aware of what you don't know. That is quadrant 2, conscious incompetence. Now move to quadrant 3. Quadrant 3 is conscious competence. In the car driving scenario, you've been out on the road a few times. There's been a number of days you've been practicing and you have become pretty good at braking, accelerating, moving around in traffic, indicating. You've become quite good at all that. However, if someone was in the back seat having an in-depth discussion with you, you wouldn't be able to do both. And that's because you are still very conscious about what you're doing. You're competent in it now. You're not out there slamming into poles. You're getting from A to B safely. You're competent in it now, but you have to think very carefully about each of the steps. Now we move to quadrant 4. You're me, you're 50 years old, you're driving from point A to point B. You can't remember what you did in between times, but you got there. And that's because now you've moved into unconscious competence. You are absolutely competent in what you do in driving a car, but you do not think about it consciously at all. It's all chunked back into your subconscious area, into your unconscious processes, and it happens automatically. So with this grid, quadrant 1, unconscious incompetence, quadrant 2, conscious incompetence, quadrant 3, conscious competence, and quadrant 4, unconscious competence. The area that we are most uncomfortable with is quadrant 2, conscious incompetence, when we are aware of what we don't do well. That is generally uncomfortable for us. It requires a lot of thought energy in order to move through our tasks when we're learning everything fresh. We don't mind ignorance is bliss in quadrant 1. We love unconscious competence in quadrant 4, where we're just magnificent at everything and we've mastered it all. We don't actually even mind conscious competence because at least we've got a handle on what we're doing. But it's quadrant 2, the conscious incompetence, the area where we are very aware of what we're not good at. That's where we struggle. And a lot of people do whatever they can to not feel, to avoid feelings of incompetence. But let me promise you, all the things that we have learned over our time, we've moved through quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 has a start and an end. It doesn't go on forever. And the quicker you embrace it, leap into that conscious incompetence, embrace that as a concept that you're happy to live with, the more you will grow and develop, and you will be absolutely on that path of constant and never-ending improvement. Again, conscious incompetence is required in order for us to get better at anything. To get better at something, we need to be not good at it at the start. That's the whole process of getting better. So I hope I have helped you get into the mindset of what's required in order to be on a path of constant and never-ending improvement. I also hope I have provided you with enough information where you can conceptualize what your dental practice, what your team would be like if you were made up of a group of people who loved CANI, constant and never-ending improvement, and that all of your future recruitment, it was part of your recruitment strategy to attract and identify characteristics of people that also love that constant journey of improvement. So when you are building out your team or replacing existing staff members, you're really fostering this wonderful culture of CANI within your organisation. I'll finish off with a quick little story. I think it plays well into this topic, and it came from, I did write a blog about this, but it came from, I've heard, again, Tony Robbins, I've referred to him 3 times today, shows what a big influence he's had in my life. Tony Robbins has said in the past, and I've looked it up and many people have said it throughout history, that we overestimate what we can get done in 1 year and we underestimate what we can get done in 10 years. And I've often thought to myself, that seems kind of not true. That seems like many people are like me, I think, where if we are asked, what are your 10-year goals? Set your 10-year goals. You go, sure, a decade. Hell, that's a long time. I could achieve anything in 10 years. And we do tend to, make very lofty dreams for a 10-year goal. Like I'll live in a mansion and I'm going to have $1 million by then at the very least, maybe 10 million. I'm going to have the best friends in the world. I'm going to be the best person in the world. Life is going to be pretty grand in 10 years. And so I've never quite understood that concept of that we underestimate what we can achieve in 10 years. So I did a bit of research into it because I wanted to understand where this brilliant person, Tony Robbins, was coming from with it. And during my research, I came across an article written by a man who referred to an online game called Osmos. And he described in this article that during the game of Osmos, you are an organism floating in medium with a whole bunch of other organisms. You are of a certain size. And as you're floating around this medium, the goal is to get bigger and bigger. And you get bigger and bigger by bumping into other organisms and taking them on as part of you, and you then get bigger. But the key is you can only take on organisms that are smaller than you. If you bump into an organism that is larger than you, then it gobbles you up, and that's the end of your game. So you're floating through this medium and you're seeking out and bumping into organisms that are smaller than you, and then you're getting bigger and bigger. You are growing because you have overcome challenges that are within your scope to be able to overcome. You are avoiding the big, scary, hairy ones that will kill you in this game, that will end your life in this game, that will end your game. You're avoiding them. And so as you're moving around, taking on the smaller ones, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, at some point, the big hairy organism that was bigger than you at one point, you now look at that and you recognize that you can actually overcome that one now. So you bump into it and overtake it because now you have become so big. You have grown so much that you can now very easily handle that organism, the issue, the challenge, the obstacle that at one point was overwhelming to you. You are now overwhelming to it. And that is what life is all about. This is why we cannot ever imagine, we always will underestimate where we will be in 10 years' time, because we have no idea how much growth we will go through by then. If you set goals for yourself now for 10 years' time, they may seem quite irrelevant to you in 10 years' time. So have for yourself the goal, I'm going to get better. I'm going to be on this journey of constant and never-ending improvement. I'm going to be that organism that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And even though there may be challenges that are too big for me right now, that they will overwhelm me right now, I know that by overcoming the challenges that are within my scope to overcome, I will get bigger and I will grow, and I will grow to a point where I will be able to overcome anything that comes by. I do hope I have inspired you to some degree. I do love the concept of CANI. It's made an enormous difference in my life. I hope you have a fantastic week. I'll speak to you soon. Bye. Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, you should join the club. The club members receive an online lunch and learn every week where I share insights, systems and strategies to improve the success of your practice. These lunch and learns could not be easier. They are recording so you can watch them at a time that suits you. Members also have full access to the library of all of our past topics. It is a powerful and effective way to upskill your team. I hope to see you there.